Well, thank you for inviting me to this, to the privilege of sharing your reflection in this meeting, which demonstrates the growing visibility of Brazilian intellectuals on the global academic scene. In this meeting, as a European, I would like to share with you 2 or 3 ideas. 4 years ago, in 2009, a French movie, Le Prophète, by Jacques Audiard, received widespread critical acclaim. In Audiard's work, 19-year-old Malik enters prison to serve a 6-year sentence for assaulting a police officer. The institution ethnic dividing lines runs between, on one side, the Corsican, on the other side, the Arabs, that is, people from North African descent, with the former holding the upper end. The film, The Prophet, was nominated for Academy Award as Best Foreign Language Picture and won the Grand Prix at the Cannes Film Festival. It introduces us to a version of today's society in France, according to which our prisons are in the hands of 2 dominating blocs, strictly defined by race, language, and religions. The film suggests that there is no real law in France, just a reign of universal corruption in which the man who uses its wits may emerge looking purer than his peers, may become indeed to be taken as a prophet. The vision of this movie, presented abroad as a culturally provocative statement, was little discussed. And to my mind, the confusion of the commentaries in the press and the vagueness of Audiard filmmaker's declaration reveal a peculiar situation which I would like to comment quickly in order to offer a modest European contribution to your discussions. In France, the words race and mestiçage usually provoke strong resistances. They are ideological, emotive resistances to these words, both from the right and from the left. Regarding mestiçage, some consider the mestiçage is synonymous for impurity, decay. That is one of the most negative impacts of globalization, threatening European historical culture. Others, on the left, judge that the use of this concept, mestiçage, is no more than a perverse and very fashionable way for masking the inequalities of a postmodern society. Still others repeat like parrots that mestiçage have always and everywhere existed, and therefore there is no special reason to spend time and energy studying this phenomenon. At the same time, academic routine and rhetorics in Europe, especially in France, still encourage us to use and misuse concepts like identity, culture, alterity, though everything covered by those terms is constantly in risk of being reified, naturalized, and elevated to the status of absolute. The dualistic model used by Todorov in The Conquest of America is typical of the power of attractiveness of simplistic models upon European minds. Useless to say that Todorov's synthesis is constantly denied, but what all we know about early colonial Mexican history. But I believe that there's other deeper motive for these many resistances. They are rarely discussed because they have to do with basic Western intellectual frameworks that today became universal. The complexity of this phenomenon, un sí que es y que no es, accords poorly with a positivist tradition that maintains a position of time based on linearity. We historians still tend to interpret past period as a product of linear movement, evolution, indeed progress and progression. Thus, the Renaissance is supposed to stem from the Middle Ages and pave the way for the modern era. Yet, mestizo mechanism constantly disrupt that linearity. Global mestizajes arose in the 16th century at the junction of distinct temporalities: Western Christendom, Amerindian, Asian, African societies. which they brought into contact and mutual penetration. Here, the usual metaphor of contiguity, succession, and replacement that obtains an evolutionary interpretation is no longer valid, not only because the temporalities of the vanquished were not automatically replaced by that of the victors, but because they did coexist with it for centuries. This idea, basic idea of linear time, is usually accompanied by belief that an order of things must exist. We often live with the idea that every system possesses a kind of primal stability, toward which it inexorably tends. Thus, it is not surprising that the complexity, mobility of mélange phenomena and conflated temporalities provoke images of disorder. Yet by placing mélange alongside disequilibrium, perturbation, we relegate constantly mélange to the status of a transitory or secondary phenomenon, in theory infinitely less revealing than the structure within which it allegedly occurs. As a matter of fact, reality hardly matches this view of things. Instead of dealing with occasional perturbation within an underlying order ever ready to reassert itself, most systems display behaviors that fluctuate between various states of equilibrium. The return to apparently identical or similar states winds up creating new situations in the long run. The more perturbed the conditions, the more oscillations between distinct states occur, provoking the dispersal of the system feature which wander in search of new configurations. The system often fluctuates between absolute regularity and absolute irregularity, maintaining a wide margin of unpredictability. Hoisbane, viewed from this angle, mélange and mestizo phenomena lose their appearance of temporary disorder and assume a basic dynamic of their own, un si que es y que no es. In my opinion, this interpretation is the one best adapted to the complexity of mélange and the significance of mestizo processes. Yet it also makes studying them much more difficult, since it runs against not only our rigid and often reified categories, but also against our usual perception of time, order, and causality. Ilya Prigozhin, in famous book The Laws of Chaos, referred to Karl Popper's discussion of clocks and clouds. Classical physics was interested primarily in clocks. Today's physics mainly in clouds. Prigozhin explained that the precisions of clocks continue to harm our thinking by making us believe it can attain the precision of a particular and practically unique models studied by classical physics. Yet what predominates in nature and our environments are clouds, those desperately complex, fuzzy, changing, fluctuating, ever moving forms. Mestizo mechanisms relate to that order of reality, to clouds. A cloud model supposes that all reality includes unknowable elements and that it also contains a dose of uncertainty and randomness. Yet historians do not always take uncertainty and randomness into account. While in the making of colonial Americas, the dose of uncertainty and randomness has been especially high, it is precisely the presence of randomness, uncertainty that lends mestizo processes the ungraspable nature, paralyzing our effort to understand them. So complexity, unpredictability, randomness, therefore seems inherent to mélange and hybrids. It may be hypothesized that they possess a chaotic dimension, as do many other social and natural phenomena. That is why our intellectual tools, at least in Europe, inherited from the Aristotelian sciences and stabilized in the 19th century, leave us most unprepared to face them, to analyze, to interpret them. The question of mestizo mechanisms is not just a problem of objects, whether or not they exist. The study of mestizo, of mélange phenomena, also and above all, raises a problem of intellectual tools. How should we conceptualize mélange? Why not to consider post-conquest and colonial society as fractal societies? Could we, for instance, analyze mestizo images and groups using the concept of attractor and attraction in order to restore the phenomena of mélange in all their complexity? Nonetheless, I would prefer to conclude drawing your attention to what, for me today, is the other side of the equation and perhaps the most important issue. And in a way, this issue is also a methodological point. How to talk about mestiçagem and race in Europe, far from the quiet space of a university. How to address normal citizens, adults, school children, coming from many parts of the world. Many centuries ago, we know that the founder of modern history, the Italian historian Leonardo Bruni, explained that history must be of great profit to the public as well as to the private citizen. Well, some years ago, in 2006 exactly, I was confronted with this difficult challenge when I was asked to organize an exhibition in the Musée du Quai Branly in Paris. While this new museum offers a wide but static, strictly non-European panorama of world culture, I received the possibility of introducing mixtures, mobility, circulation, global conflicts, and shocks. But how to translate into objects, images, movies, and very short text a series of statements about these questions? And what kind of introduction and orientation to propose to people belonging to a Europe which is more and more looking like Latin America and the US? A problem is not just a question of analytical tools, words, and concepts. It has also to do with how to use the Latin American and North American experiences in order to help people in Europe to find their way among these new European societies and culture and make their choices, the choices they consider the best for the future. In this case, methodological rigor and responsibility as a citizen appear to be inextricably connected, while academic rhetoric becomes unforgivable. Talking about transfer, the challenge is double. And it is quite problematic because it immediately, this transfer questions the historical relations between Western Europe and the rest of the world. The Americas are not only a huge laboratory, a human, social, ethnic laboratory combining a lot of historical experience from colonial castas to US segregation, Brazilian quota. The Americas are also a part of the world which, at least since the 19th century, has developed an intellectual, conceptual production about race and mestiçage. I am not only referring to the US thinkers, but also to Mexican ones like Gonzalo Aguirre Beltrán, Peruvian, Brazilian like Gilberto Freire, Serge Gruzinski de Holanda. The challenge, of course, raises the question of transfer and of inversion of the traditional relation between Europe and the other. That's why I am especially interested in listening to and learning from your papers. It's a very big issue in my part of the world. And it's very difficult, not only because of this difficulty of thinking about race and mestiçage, but also because it obliges on a very material, concrete, social, and omnipresent issue to change our relation with you, I mean with this part of the world. And not only considering that it's an exotic part of the world with a very exotic problem, but trying to learn and to accept that there is also, and not only thinking of the US, but of Brazil, of Mexico, an intellectual production. Means that behind the discussion of today, there's, for a European or a French, this other challenge. Of course, it's very difficult to explain to our colleagues in Europe that there are not only mestizo, black, Africans, Indians in America, but also books and ideas That's why I thank you very much for inviting me, because it's for me another possibility of learning from your countries and learning from your experiences and from your methodologies. Thank you.